Hello everyone, welcome to BioExplaining. This is the second part of our topic pollination in plants. So let's begin. Okay, so first let's have a very quick recap of what we have studied in the previous video. So what we saw was what is pollination. So in simple words, we can say that pollination refers to the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. So it is the transfer of pollens from the anther, which is the male part, to the stigma, which is the female part of a flower. Then what did we see? Then we saw that the types of pollination we have, one is self-pollination and the other is cross-pollination. So in our last video, we have discussed in details about what is self-pollination, what are its types, what are the required conditions for self-pollination to occur, etc., etc., the advantages, disadvantages. In this video, we are going to be concerned about what is cross-pollination, what are the required conditions, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's begin with cross-pollination. So what is cross-pollination? It is the transfer of pollen from the anther of flowers of one plant to the stigma of flowers of another plant, and both of them should belong to the same species. That means both the plants should be of the same kind. So let's understand this in a simple manner. Say that these are the two plants that you have and both are of the same kind. So what will happen is, say from this flower here, the pollen grains are released by the anther of this flower. And say this flower here has the female part, which is the stigma. So cross-pollination refers to the fact that from one plant, the pollen grains are transferred to another flower which is placed in a separate plant, and both of the plants should belong to the same species. So this is what you call to be cross-pollination, or there are other terms to be used. One is xenogamy, or we can also call this to be allogamy. Okay, so let us talk about the various conditions that favor cross-pollination. The first condition is unisexuality. So let us try to understand what unisexuality is. Say we have one plant bearing only male flowers. So what we can say, that this plant bears staminate flowers, right? That means only male part. And we have another plant which bears flowers that are only pistillate, right? That means these are flowers containing only the female parts. Okay, so the only way to pollinate such kind of flowers should be what? That the pollen grains that are released by the anther of these flowers should go to the female flowers that are present on the other plant, right? So pollens should be transferred this way. So hence unisexuality is the first condition that we are studying here, right? That is, the flowers may be either male or they may be female, and they may be born on separate plants. So the cross-pollination is the only possibility in this case. The second condition that we have is self-sterility. So the term itself gives its meaning, self-sterility, meaning that the flowers are sterile from its own pollen grains. Meaning, suppose the stigma is ready, it's receiving the pollen grains from anthers of the same flower, but still the pollen grain fails to further grow and fertilize and further steps to occur. So what will happen in this case, that if the pollen of the same flower is unable to fertilize that flower, so the only option left is pollen from some other flowers, from some other plant to come and pollinate it, right? So in these cases, only the pollen from another plant belonging to the same species can effectively complete the process of pollination. Such examples can be seen in the ray florets of sunflower, in orchids, etc. Okay, so the third condition that we have is Herkogamy. So if you break the term into two, what are the things? One is herko. Herko means barrier. And then you have gamy. We know that what does gamy means? Gamy means marriage. Right? That means there is some kind of barrier for the pollen to go and land on the stigma. So what happens is, because of some sort of barrier, the pollen of the flower cannot reach its own stigma. Example, in flowers of pansy, there's a hood which covers the stigma. You can see in the image here. That see in pansy, there's a certain hood which is present that is covering the stigma so that its own pollen cannot come and fertilize it. Same thing happens in case of gloriosa. In case of gloriosa, these are the stigma, these things. These are the stigma of the gloriosa. So they cannot be fertilized by its own pollen grains. And also here also in Calotropis, this same kind of Herkogamy condition is seen. Right. So the next condition that's there is Dichogamy. So what is Dichogamy? Dichogamy means that the male parts and the female parts do not mature at the same time. Right? That is, in a bisexual flower, the anther as well as the stigma both are present, but both of them have not matured together. So in this case, self-pollination is not possible. So the only option left is cross-pollination. So this dichogamy can be of two different types. First, let us understand what is protandry. So protos means first and andry means male, comes from androecium, right? That means the male part has matured first. So in this case, what happens is the anthers, they are mature and they are releasing the pollen grains. The anthers are mature and the pollen grains are released. So what we can write here is pollen grains released by anther, because the male part is already mature. But where does the problem lie? The problem lies in the fact that the stigma is not yet mature. The stigma is not mature. Right. So in this case, self-pollination is not possible. Even if the pollen comes and lands on the stigma is not ready to receive them. So cross-pollination is the only option that to be done. That is, the anthers will release the pollens, they will go to some other plant and they will pollinate that flower. The second thing that we have is protogyny. So what is protogyny? Protos means first and gyne means female, right? So in this case, say the stigma is receptive. Stigma is mature or receptive. So the stigma is ready. But what has happened to the anthers? The anthers are not ready to release the pollen grains. They have not matured. So pollens not produced. Okay, so protandry can be seen in plants like salvia and sunflower, and protogyny is a condition commonly found in custard apples, people, etc. The fifth condition that we have is known as heterostyly, right? So in such flowers, the stigma and anthers grow at different heights. So self-pollination cannot be done. So if you look into this diagram, see the name itself tells you heterostyly. That means the style is of different heights. So if you have long styled flowers, that means the slender part of the female part is very long. This part is the style. So it is much greater in height as compared to the anther. So its own pollens cannot go and reach the stigma. And the other case is short style. Say the style is very short. That means they are much lesser in height as compared to the stamens. So here again, the pollen grains released by the anther cannot come and sit on the stigma of its own flower and fertilize it. Right? So what happens is heterostyly is a condition which prevents self-pollination. So the only option is pollens from such flowers should go somewhere else. And the only option here is that pollens of some other flowers should come and sit on the stigma here. So cross-pollination is the only option here. This can be found in plants like primrose, in case of oxalis, etc. Okay, so now there are category of flowers called as chasmogamous flowers. What are these flowers? They have their reproductive structures exposed because of open petals. Right, so because the petals are open, so all the internal structures, the androecium, the gynoecium, they are very well exposed. So these flowers are known as chasmogamous flowers. So in these flowers, what happens is external pollinators can come and pollinate them. That means that they can very easily be cross-pollinated. So for example, we can have oxalis and hibiscus. So this here, what we have shown is oxalis. And then in the bottom diagram, what you have, that is hibiscus, right? Now, what happens in this case is that very rarely self-pollination can also occur. Why? Because this is a bisexual flower. It has its own anthers, its own stigma, and the anther produces pollens which can very well go and sit on the stigma, and then further process can take place. But because the reproductive structures are exposed, there are high chances that other pollinators might come and finish the pollination process. So, chasmogamous flowers are mainly prone to be self-pollinated. Okay, so with this, we are done with the conditions that enable cross-pollination to occur, or rather which favor cross-pollination to happen. Now what are we getting into? Now we are getting into the various advantages of cross-pollination. Like in the previous video, we have seen what are the various advantages of self-pollination. Similarly, there are advantages of cross-pollination. So what are they? The first thing that is healthier offsprings are produced, right? Why do I say healthier offsprings are produced? Because if you can remember that in case of self-pollination, we studied that repeated rounds of self-pollination reduces the vitality and vigor. The plants are not properly immune if self-pollination keeps on happening generation after generation. So as opposed to that, when cross-pollination occurs, the offsprings produced are much healthier. The second advantage that is present is new varieties can be produced. New varieties can be produced. Say, for example, I have a mango tree in my garden which gives me very large sized mangoes. And say you are my neighbor, you have a mango tree which has very sweet mangoes. Now, if cross-pollination happens between these plants, what can we expect in the next generation? We can expect that we should get large mangoes which are sweet. That means both the good qualities have been incorporated. So that is why we say that if cross-pollination happens, then the genetic characters of the two parents might get incorporated and some new varieties are supposed to be produced. The third advantage of cross-pollination is that seeds are abundant and of good quality. Seeds are abundant and of good quality. So to ensure cross-pollination, large number of pollen grains have to be released. So if all of them or most of them are pollinated, that means lots of seeds are produced and they are of good quality, having good vigor, good vitality, giving rise to plants which are immune to a lot of diseases. So if something has advantages, it surely has its own disadvantages also. So what are the disadvantages of cross-pollination? The first is pollination is not always sure. Why do we say this? Like say the wind is carrying pollen grains from a certain plant. So the wind might blow in any direction at a certain point of time and it might not land on the stigma of the same species, right? So in that case, pollination is not a sure thing to be happening here. The second is lots of pollen grains are produced. Lots of pollen grains produced are wasted. Why do we say wasted? Just what I said in the previous point also, that the wind might blow in some different direction and land on some other species stigma. So in that case, the pollen grain fails to grow. So all of the pollen grain gets wasted. Even insects, they might go and sit on some other stigma, or by some any other means, the pollen grains might not reach the stigma of the same species flower. So in both these cases, what will happen is the pollen grains are wasted. So to cope up with this condition, plants that are cross-pollinated always produce pollen grains in quite a few greater numbers. And the third point that we have, the disadvantage, is that flowers need to have a lot of extra characters. That is, they need to be very showy. So flowers need to be attractive for pollinators. So who are the pollinators? Mostly the insects. Right? And what do we mean when we say attractive? By attractive, we mean to say that, say they have to be very large in size, the petals have to be properly colored, they have to be showy, they should have good fragrance, so they should be scented, and they should contain nectar. Otherwise, the insects will not come and sit on the flowers. Okay, so that's it on today's topic. The next topic that we are going to cover is agents of pollination. So please wait for the next video to get a simple and easy explanation on the topic of agents of pollination. Please stay tuned. So if you like the video, please like, comment, share, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to my channel by explaining. Let's keep learning. Meet you in the next video. Bye bye.